I'm Karen Dobby and I work for the State of Environment Portering Unit in SEPA, and I'm also part of the editorial group for Scotland's Environment website. So we know that Scottish people talk about the weather all the time, but there is a difference between weather and climate. Weather is the everyday temperature, rain and wind that we experience. So in the short term, that changes from hour to hour, from minute to minute, whereas climate is the average weather taken over a long period of time, so typically over a 30-year time period. That's really what we expect to happen rather than what actually happens. Scotland has what we call a temperate maritime climate. It's known as temperate because it's moderate. We rarely have any extremes of climate, and it's maritime because of the influence of the sea. The influence of the sea keeps us cool in the summer, it gives us mild winters, and we basically have rainfall spread throughout the year. Although we don't have any extremes, we still have differences in climate across the country and also between seasons. So the south of Scotland is generally warmer than the north, which you might expect. The west is generally milder and cloudier and wetter than the east, and also the west has a lower range of temperatures than the east, and this is because our climate is influenced by a westerly airflow coming from the Atlantic. We've been collecting weather data in Scotland since the 1800s, and this gives us our long-term climate information. If we look at the average temperatures for 10-year periods since the 1850s, we can see that the last 3 decades have been warmer than any of the others before that. At the same time, we can see that our rainfall patterns have changed, and this has led to drier summers, wetter winters and more frequent heavy rain. On a global scale, we see the same temperature pattern, and we also see that 13 of the 14 warmest years on record have all occurred this century. Climate has changed throughout the Earth's history, and there's a range of natural processes that have affected our climate. These include changes in the activity from the sun, changes in the Earth's orbit, which affects how sunlight affects the Earth. We have also had a number of volcanic eruptions which erupt gases and particles into the atmosphere. However, in the last 100 years or so, the climate has started to change much more rapidly than we've ever seen before, and there's overwhelming evidence to suggest that the majority of this warming is due to the increasing amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. The Earth is kept warm because we have greenhouse gases in the atmosphere such as CO2, methane and nitrous oxide, and these gases trap the sun's heat. This is a natural process. It's been happening for as long as we've had an atmosphere, and it actually allows us to live in the Earth, because if we didn't have any greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, our Earth would be 30 degrees cooler. However, if you look at the change in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere over the last 2,000 years, you can see that they have increased rapidly over the last century. Scientific evidence now shows with at least 95% certainty that human activity is the main cause of this increase in greenhouse gases. As I mentioned earlier, we've been collecting weather data in Scotland since the mid-1800s, and this has shown us that Scotland's climate has changed. If we look more specifically over the last 50 years, we can see some pretty obvious patterns. For example, the mean annual temperature has increased by over a degree Celsius. We've also seen a decline in the number of days a year on which there's frost. There's also been a clear increase in the number of hours of sunshine for all regions of Scotland, especially in the spring. And for rainfall, although we've seen an overall increase in rainfall, this varies across the country. These variations are more marked in winter and much greater in the west and north than in the east. The number of days of heavy rain a year has also increased, especially in the west and the north of the country. The best current understanding we have of how the climate works and how it will change in future suggests that in Scotland we're likely to see hotter, drier summers and milder, wetter autumns and winters. We can also expect to see an increase in summer heat waves, extreme temperatures and drought, and also an increased frequency and intensity of extreme rainfall with a reduced incidence of frost and snowfall. So the most obvious impacts on people are likely to be caused by more frequent extreme weather events such as heavy rainfall events, and these, coupled with rising sea levels, are likely to increase the risk of flooding. This will affect our physical surroundings, it will affect our buildings and our infrastructure, for example our roads, and it will also affect people's health and well-being. So the main impacts on the environment are also likely to be caused by changing temperature and rainfall patterns. These are likely to result in changes in our river flows and also in our soil moisture. It also may increase the likelihood of wildfires. These are all likely to result in losses of habitats and the wildlife they support. However, it will also lead to new habitats being able to form, and new species may become established as the climate becomes more favourable for them. Rising sea levels may result in loss of important habitats and species. If we have increased coastal erosion and flooding, it may damage our rare habitats such as macar. As well as affecting our habitats and species, warmer temperatures are likely to lead to a longer growing season for some crops, so this will be a benefit to agriculture. However, higher rainfall may make it more difficult to cultivate the land. A changing climate may also change the types of plants and animals we see, and this may include species which are not currently native to Scotland. As I said earlier, the main reason that our climate is changing in Scotland is because of the increasing amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. In Scotland, the main sources of these greenhouse gases are energy supply, followed by agriculture and land use, and then our transport system. Together, these make up over 70% of our emissions. Although our emissions have decreased by nearly 30% since 1990, we need to do more. Our emissions have fallen because of a decline in closure of heavy industries like steel making. We also now have more efficient energy generation, we store more carbon in soils and trees, and we're seeing a decline in methane emissions from landfill sites. These have all contributed to the reduction in emissions. Climate change is a global issue, and greenhouse gas emissions affect the whole planet regardless of where they come from. So tackling climate change requires coordinated actions by nations across the world. In Scotland, we've made a commitment to cut our greenhouse gas emissions by 80% of 1990 levels by 2050. These are very ambitious targets and will require changes for everyone, our industries as well as ourselves. Some of these changes will need to be big. For example, we'll need to change the way our electricity is generated, whereas others will be small, such as being more careful in the way we use energy in our homes and businesses or the decisions we make about transport. Although in Scotland we think we're a small country with a small population, we can still make a big difference because we're responsible for more than our fair share of greenhouse gas emissions.